I have nothing. I have no words. I think this book truly helps you do that. Hello guys, welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be talking about a few of the books that I've read recently. One, because I didn't do a February wrap up, so I feel like I need to get that out. But it was only, I read 2 books, so I felt like I couldn't really do a video on 2 books, so I figured I would talk about the last like 3 to 4 books that I am either currently reading, just finished, or have read and are honestly loving. So before we get into this video, if you have not, please subscribe down below. That way you don't miss any of my other videos, and then like this video if you enjoy it. I feel like I have not talked about books, just plain books, and far too long. I know I was doing a lot of traveling and I did feel really bad about a lot of the videos that were coming out. However, that was kind of what my life was the last 2-3 months. So today's video, all about books. We're gonna go into firstly the books that I finished in February. So let's start with the first book that I finished in February. All right, so first, if this kind of background looks different, it's because I'm not at my house. I am at my boyfriend's, so it's not always going to be like this, unfortunately. However, this video, it will be, in case you guys were wondering. The first book that I finished in February, most recently, that I actually ended up loving was Beautiful Ugly by Alice Feeney. I'll pop the book in right here. It's a beautiful cover. And I actually saw Sarah Caroli reading this book. She posted it on Instagram, and I remember I screenshotted it just because any book she's reading, I'm like, okay, give it to me, I'll read it too. And I picked it up. It kind of took a little bit of time for me to actually pick up the book and start reading it. But one day in February, I was like, you know what? I kind of want like a mystery thriller. I remember I read the back of this book and genuinely got chills when I read it for some reason. So I was like, obviously that's a good sign. So Beautiful Ugly is like a thriller. I wouldn't say it's really mystery, but it's like suspenseful thriller book. And it talks about a guy who's an author. What's his name? Grady Green. So Grady Green is they're all English. So, you know, that was kind of fun because I had just gotten back from my Europe trip, but Grady Green is an English man. He lives in England and he's an author. He married a girl that he met named Abby, and they were like happily married, all of this stuff. Well, it opens up to basically him maybe becoming New York Times bestseller. Like he was on that road to kind of like this amazing thing. And his wife was on her way home from work. He calls her and he's like, hey, I'm, you know, the New York Times bestseller, and she gets emotional, but then he hears brakes really loud and it's raining, and he's like, what happened? What happened? And she said, there's a girl laying in the middle of the road. It was pouring. It wasn't like nighttime, but it was dusk, and he's like, nope, stay on the phone, do not get out of your car. And she's like, well, what if she's hurt? All of this stuff. None of this is spoiler, by the way. I feel like I don't really want to go too much into spoilers. Just in case you haven't read the book, I feel like this might be a good video of like why you should read it. So I'm not going to go into spoilers. If you guys want to see a spoiler video, let me know. However, all of this stuff is in that summarization at the front of the book. So anyway, he's like, don't get out of the car, blah, blah, blah. Well, she gets out of the car and he doesn't hear anything else from her. So she's about less than a mile away from home. He goes and checks and she's missing. Her car is still like there running. Her phone, her purse is all in the seat still. And that's kind of where it ends. So then he's like, has this writer's block. He cannot write. He's having a lot of trouble. So his publicist actually tells him, you know, I know of this island, I can send you there and that would help you write. So he decides to go. Immediately, things start to go really weird. There's just things people are saying, or the house that he's living in, he discovers things. And it's honestly very intriguing and interesting, and I loved it. I just flew right through it. I will say I listened to the audiobook for a portion of this, not realizing that the Spotify audiobook first of all, had two like voice actors for, you know, Grady Green and then Abby, because it does go dual point of view. So you kind of get her point of view leading up to everything. Maybe their, you know, relationship wasn't as rainbows and butterflies as you might have thought. So I loved that. And then there was also like ocean noises, because it takes place like the islands on the edge of a cliff. So like there's ocean noises every time it changes point of view. Or there was like, when they're talking on the phone, it actually sounds like he's on the phone. Like, I just loved that. It was very immersive, and I have nothing. I have no words. It was just a really good audiobook. So anyway, things start to go weird. There's plot twist after plot twist, and I was just, my jaw dropped. Guys, if you want a good thriller book, there were like some confusing things towards the end, so I won't like say this is the best thriller book out there. It's honestly a really good book, and I haven't found a thriller like that in a really long time. So go read Beautiful Ugly. Highly recommend that book. I ended up rating it 4 stars. Honestly, I would probably rate it 4.5 if the end wasn't a little confusing, or it was kind of like it was leading up and then it was kind of like plateaued. It didn't really like boom, that's what happened, if that makes sense. That was the first book I finished in February. Highly recommend. Amazing. I'm so glad I read it. Honestly, it's a book that I probably would reread. If there was like a special cover too, I would pick that up, because it was a beautiful book. It makes me want to read more Alice Feeney books. I almost picked up Rock, Paper, Scissors this weekend, but I didn't. So if you recommend that book or any of her other books, tell me and I will 100% pick them up. Moving on to the next book. The next book that I finished was Phantasma by Kylie Smith. This was a book that I had been itching to read for a while. Again, Sarah Caroli. She actually read this before it got really popular, and ever since she read it, I really wanted to pick it up. I really wanted to read it. It's a fantasy novel. They have the challenges, so there's different trials, but there's like ghosts and phantoms and spirits and that kind of stuff. So necromancy, it's just a different type of book that I'm not used to. So that was very intriguing to me. There is a romance that sparks that obviously keeps you hooked the whole way through. It is not a standalone. There are more books in the series. I don't think the second one is out yet though. I'm pretty sure it comes out later this year. So I'm gonna have to look into that. Also, lighting might change a little bit. There's a cloud that is now in front of the sun. However, that one was very, very good. I would say getting into it, you're learning the world as with any fantasy. But it honestly, the action starts off really fast. I feel like the book kind of flies by fast because each level or challenge is like a new chapter. So you're always moving along. It's never really stagnant. This book follows a girl named Ophelia, and her mom just recently passed away, and her sister is basically trying to find a way to get money to afford their house. This contest comes around, and basically the only way Ophelia can save her sister is to enter Phantasma, which is a deadly contest. It's a haunted mansion, and each night or each, next day, there are new trials that you have to basically survive to make it to the end, and then at the end you're granted one wish. Well, while she's in this, trying to find her sister, understand where she is, basically save her, she meets this guy, and boom, it's kind of like that not grumpy sunshine, because she's really not a sunshine character, but it's more like she doesn't want anything to do with that, and he's just there, and she's able to like use him to help her. So yes, I don't want to say too much more. Basically, she enters the contest, she goes through the trials. Will she find her sister? Will there be a romance that kind of comes out of it? What will happen at the end? Of course, there's always a plot twist. So highly recommend that book. Again, fantasy. It's, I think, a book of, let me see if it tells me how many. It just says Wicked Games #1, so that's the first book. I know that there's already a name for the second one. I don't know if I can figure that out. Yes, Enchantra comes out April 8th this year. So set your clocks because that's the time the second book comes out. And I'm excited. This is what the cover of the new book looks like. I think that'll be so fun. Oh, I love this. So if you want kind of a more visual or understanding of how this book is laid out, Goodreads actually says, a court of thorns and roses meets Caraval in this seductive fantasy adventure. There's steamy romance, morally gray interest, jaw-dropping twists, of course. So guys, check out Phantasma. It was so good. It was a thicker book, so like if you're looking for something that's not just going to be over like that, this is a really good book. And again, there's multiple books. So that was the second book that I finished in February. I did start 2 other books in February. We're going to talk about the first one right now because I actually finished that a few days ago. The third book we're going to talk about is Beartown by Frederick Bachman. Again, there's the cover. Where I feel like every single book I talk about now is like, oh, Sarah Caroli, oh, Destiny Sidwell. Like, basically, they talked about this author and I wanted to pick it up. There was this book and then Anxious People. I chose this book first just because it was the first book I had kind of heard of. So I will probably also look into Anxious People eventually. I don't own it yet, but Beartown was a book that I started, and I started it on Spotify. I love listening to audiobooks when I'm working out because I feel like for me, I'm able to get my workouts in or like my training, but then I'm also doing like YouTube work. So I'm able to work and work out at the same time, if that makes sense. So I always start a book at the month and then just do it while I'm in the car or if I'm cleaning, basically so I'm not like wasting my time when I could be like reading. So anyway, I started this book on Spotify. It was a very confusing book for me at first, if I'm being honest. There are so many characters, and even once I got like 80% of the way through, I was like, wait, is that the mom or is that the is that the daughter or is that the friend? Or I would like confuse the mom's name and the friend's name. By the end of it, I understood. So it couldn't have been that confusing. However, a lot of characters. It's set in a place called Beartown. It's just a very, very small town, and ice hockey is like the biggest talk of the town. That is the thing that they are known for, is their ice hockey team. Their junior semifinal match is coming up, and they have a chance to win the semifinals and actually go to the finals. However, this is a catalyst for something that happens, and it leaves a girl traumatized, and basically like a lot of turmoil comes of it. I would say half of the book was like me understanding the characters, understanding the players. You kind of get more of their personalities and what they really are as people, if that makes sense. So like some of them are very like wholehearted, genuine, kind people. Other ones you just, oh, you want to shake them because they're so rude, or they're very selfish and they treat others awful. So that would be like half of the book. Then you start getting into like, oh shoot, is this where this book is going? Because that was me when I was driving one day. I was like, this is not about to happen. So then that kind of climax happens, and the rest of the book is, how is all of this going to come about? What is going to happen? Is this bad thing gonna happen, or will it resolve? Or, oh my gosh, I feel so deeply for this character because how could this happen? And so much love for other characters that truly show how kind-hearted and caring they are. So just the writing in general really, really portrays a beautiful picture of these characters and what they're going through, and the family dynamic, like their found family dynamic of how the parents are handling things and sad experiences that they've had in the past and how that's still affecting them. So it's just a beautifully written book. But I would say if you're having a little trouble at the start, really try to push through as much as you can. I think I would have had a lot more trouble if I would have been reading the physical book versus listening to it. Now, say I would have got it like halfway, I think it would have been fine reading the rest of it. But I think that because of that was more difficult for me, listening to it really helped the challenging aspects of the book and like getting into it and being interested in reading it. Because I'm gonna be honest, sports is not really my thing to read about. I don't love reading sports, whether it's a sports romance or like a fiction book. So that aspect wasn't what grabbed me. It was like, I've heard how beautiful the writing was, and I 100% agree with the people that have said that. Now, I also believe that this book is for certain people. You'll either like it or you don't like it. I feel like there's not a very big middle ground because how the book is written and the things that are discussed in the book. So there is that. I really enjoyed that book. I just finished it not too long ago. Oh, I didn't give my rating for Phantasma. I ended up rating Phantasma 4 stars, and then I also rated Beartown. I couldn't rate it 3 because when I base it off other books, I feel like it really is a little higher than a 3. I'm rating it about a 4. 4.5, like between 3.75 and 4.5. How about that? Because I really did enjoy it. And I highly recommend that book if you want something that's a little bit more serious of a book, like information-wise and everything like that. It really opens your mind to like how people deal with certain things, or it's almost like you don't really realize what people are going through until you experience it yourself. And I think this book truly helps you do that. So yeah, Beartown, highly recommend. Not a book that I thought I would love, but I actually really enjoyed it. And yeah, the last book I'm going to talk about, I'm actually currently reading it and I'm almost done with it, but I really want to put it in this video because I do like it. So the book that I'm currently reading is The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King by Carissa Broadbent. Another fantasy book. I read the first one, I would say last year. I don't know when, but I read it last year. And it's a vampire book. So vampire fantasy, totally not my speed. I don't read a lot of vampire. I feel like I really don't know of a lot of fantasy books that have vampires, except for Throne of the Fallen by Carrie Maniscalco is the other vampire book that I read last year. I was just finding all the vampire books. However, this was a book I read going into the second one, which is The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King. I felt like I did not remember a lot of what was going on, even to the point where, like, looking at it actually right now, I don't remember even reading like the characters' names. Like, that was not something I remembered either. However, a few things were coming back to me after, I would say, the first like 10% of the book, 15, 20%, somewhere in there. And as it was going, I was like, okay, I'm kind of like caught up again. Like, I remember. I almost feel like I should have read like the last 2 chapters before going into this one. However, it's going good. There is that romance that's kind of sparking again. Because it's a second book, I don't want to go too much into detail, but I do want to kind of talk about the premise of like what it's about. That way you can go into the first book with a better idea. There is Oraya, which is how I've been saying her name, but I don't know if it's Oraya, but she is adopted human daughter of the Nightborn vampire king. So it kind of puts her in a very bad place because she is human and everyone around her are vampires. So the only way for her to stand a chance is entering the Kajari, which is a legendary tournament held by the goddess of death. So it puts her through a ton of different challenges, but it's not just her, of course. There's other vampires that are like the most high warriors of like 3 different vampire houses. So will she stand a chance? That's kind of what you're trying to figure out. She has to make an alliance with a gentleman, of course, to stand a chance, and his name is Rain. I love the way his name is spelled, by the way, but she makes this alliance with Rain to be able to complete the Kajari and survive. Of course, there's like a, does she like him? Does she not? Because he's so vicious and he's a quick killer and all of this stuff. But of course, there's some kind of thing blooming underneath her between them. Of course, it leaves on a cliffhanger and then you're like, ah, what is going on? So the book ends, and it definitely made me want to go into the second book. So the second book's picking up from there. It's going through all of the aftermath of what happened in the first book, but then some things go wrong. I would say about 40% of the way through, it really started to pick up. You got that action part, but also that tension, because things aren't the same as it was before everything happened, if that makes sense. So that was the last book. I am currently 75% of the way through that book. So I'm not quite done, and I will talk more about it later in the month because I'm hoping to finish more books. However, I wanted to talk about those books because they are too good not to mention and to talk about, even if they have their own video, of course, but highly recommend those books. If you guys have any other recommendations for me, let me know, because I need to pick up my reading. I don't know what it's been. I'm not really in a slump, but I just feel like I've been so busy that it's hard to find good time to prioritize it instead of just pushing it off or doing other things. So let me know. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, again, give it a like, subscribe. I got more videos coming out soon, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.